Howdy. This is a workshop interview over stress management and presentation skills with Professor Campbell. Professor Campbell started off at Texas A&M in the Corps, but now is a professor of kinesiology. He teaches a 3-hour Kines 223 class as well as many 1-hour Kines classes. Professor Campbell is a man who really cares about his students. He not only cares about their physical fitness, but their emotional, mental, and spiritual wellness as well. Many of his current and former students come to his office hours for all kinds of life counseling. So if there was ever a professor who was closer to a mentor than a teacher, it would be Professor Campbell. And we are very thankful that he has taken the time today to teach us what he has learned over his life. Thank you, Coach, for having me today. We got 10 questions submitted by our members, and we'd like to hear what you think. Is stress becoming an increasing problem for college students and people in the workforce, and why?
Well, stress is a very, very important subject that you need to make sure you deal with, no matter if it's good stress or bad stress. All right? And the neat thing about humans is we're all different. And we all deal with stress in different ways. And so the most important thing is you need to deal with the stress. But we have actually seen increases in stress-related incidences on campus going into our counseling center. So stress is very, very, very important to deal with it. And as far as the workplace, it depends on different types of work. Some work is more stressful than others. Some work could be physical stress. Some work could be psychological stress. So there's lots of different stressors out there. But the big thing is you have to understand what your stress is, what is stressing you, and then you have to deal with that problem. And that's the most important thing to do, is make sure you deal with the stress.
Perfect. So what is the difference between good and bad stress?
So that's a great question, because for stress, you have two different types. You have what we call eustress, which is good stress, and you have distress, which is our bad stress. So for every different person, those stressors are different. So for one person, could be a distress, negative stress, but another person, that could be a eustress for them. It just depends on the different person. You have to understand how the stress affects you. So what's one of the most bigger stressors for college students?
Finals.
Okay. Tests.
Tests, yeah.
All right. Some other stressors that people don't think about that could be stress would be money.
Yeah.
Lots of people stress about money. For some people, it's not a big stressor. Some people that have money, it's not a stressor. Some people that don't have money, it's a stressor. Some people that don't have money, it's not a big stressor. It just depends on how you perceive the stress is. But then you look at finals, or you look at tests. So some people get test anxiety, and it causes their stress to skyrocket. Other people, number one, they prepare, so they're not quite as stressed. Because anytime you do take a test, you are stressed, but you have to deal with that stress. If you're prepared for it, then you're more prepared to deal with the stress. So on the other hand, you get your test score back. Could be eustress, good stress, could be bad stress, depending on the grade.
Right.
So there are differences in stress, but it all depends on the person, on how they view the stress affects them. All right. I love the game of golf. All right, but golf is one of those double-edged swords, because one time you hit a great shot, you're like, yeah, good eustress. Next shot, over in the woods, bad stress.
Right.
All right. But you hit that next shot and it's good, and that's one thing that keeps you coming back.
Mm-hmm.
All right. But you have to find ways to deal with the stress, and how each person deals with stress is differently. Some people like to work out to help manage their stress levels. All right. Other people just like to sit and maybe listen to music or play music. Other people have different hobbies. There's lots of different ways to manage your stress, but you have to figure out which works best for the individual. There's not one overall, there's not a stress pill for you.
Right.
Everybody's different, so they have to figure out what works best for themselves.
Yeah, well said. So, here's a cool one. How can people prepare their bodies and minds for stressful events?
That is a very good question. So, first off, mind. When we think of our mind, well, not just mind but body, we want to think of wellness. All right. So we have 7 dimensions of wellness, and our mind is one of those dimensions of wellness. We call it our intellectual wellness. All right. So intellectual wellness has to do with, number one, staying up with what's going on in the world. All right. Not just our little spot here, whether it's in physics or in biology or in kinesiology class, whatever class you're in, or whatever organization you're in. Look what's going on in your community. Look what's going on in your state. Look what's going on in United States. Look what's going on globally. All right, it's being in touch with everything that's going on. All right, physically, number one, you have to have your body in order to be able to function. All right, and the biggest thing that you have to work with is your heart. All right, so we have physical wellness as well. That's another one of our 7 dimensions of wellness. So physically, we have to have a good heart. All right, if our heart is not able to pump blood, is not able, we call it cardiac output. So cardiac output is stroke volume times your heart rate. So stroke volume is how much blood your heart can pump out at each time it beats. So the more efficient your heart is, the better your body works. All right, whether you're going to be lifting weights, or whether you're running, or whether if you don't work out at all, that's fine. You still need to be able to move from place to place. You need to be able to function. All right, and you need to be able to function at the best of your ability. And the more you prepare your body for that, the better you're going to function. And it'll help you later on in life as well. That's one thing, even when I was young, I was looking to, the day and the week. You're not looking down the road. It's real. We just did our lecture on nutrition this week, and 100 calories a day that you don't burn. That's less than like a sliver of a Kit Kat bar.
Yeah.
All right. So a sliver of a Kit Kat bar every day that you don't burn, and you do that over 20 years, that turns into 42 pounds. But we don't see that 42 pounds. New Year's comes, we step on the scale. Oh, I only gained 2 pounds this year. All right. Next year, I only gained 2 pounds this year. I'm doing good. Well, 20 years down the road, that turns into 40 plus pounds. Little sliver of a Kit Kat bar is not a whole lot.
Right.
100 calories is not much, but it might take you 30 minutes on the treadmill to burn that 100 calories off.
Right.
Depending on the intensity you have on your treadmill.
Right. So we kind of talked about this, like, time differences. So what are some techniques to manage a stressful 30 minutes, a stressful day, a stressful week, and a stressful year?
Again, a lot of stress has to deal with how the individual deals with stress. And that's kind of what you have to understand, but it's also looking ahead of what you have in front of you. If you know you have a test, all right, if you know you have a test, everybody gets our syllabus, we know what we have, we know when our test should be. Don't wait till the last minute to study, because that just puts more stress on you. But it depends on the person, because some people do really well with that much stress at the last minute. All right, and the other thing we call the function curve. And so as stress increases, there is this point at which a person functions at the highest level with a certain amount of stress. And that stress differs with each person. All right, and it's been found that athletes have to perform better at higher levels of stress. All right, so for instance, my wife, she was a college athlete here at Texas A&M. She's on the track team, and she functions best at higher levels of stress. When she is at a higher stress level, that is when she is at her optimum performance, whether it's doing something athletically or if it's in the business world. So she does, that's where she performs best. There are other people that have to have less stress to where they perform at their optimum level. And then you get to the point where you have too much stress, and then you start getting diminishing returns.
Right.
And that's where we don't want to get to. So, in planning, understand what you have coming up. You know, you can look at your year. Once you get out of school, you can look at your year and you can start kind of see, all right, we got this. What happens at Christmas time? Most of the time, people spend a little bit more money at Christmas time. So you got to know, all right, we got to plan for that. You can plan ahead for certain things. Now, there's going to be certain things that pop up that you have no idea. You know, somebody gets sick. That's not, you get sick. That could be, that hurts. Number one, if you're out of school for a couple of days, that puts you behind. So then that adds to your stress on top of your just normal everyday stress. So there's lots of different things that happen. Some things you can plan for, some things you can't. But a couple of things you can do that will help. Number one, again, know how you deal with stress. If you work out to help reduce your stress levels, then you need to plan workouts into your day. All right. If it's just taking time to meditate or relax, have time to yourself, you got to plan those into your day. You can do those little things, but a lot of it has to do with time management. But the big thing is, don't let your stress fester. All right, you always have to deal with what's stressing you. All right, sometimes if you stress, you don't have to deal with stress because it already makes you feel good. Mm-hmm. Most of the stress we talk about is what we would be considered distress. But then again, what might be a distress to you might not be a distress to me. So it all comes to look ahead, know how you deal with stress, and plan some of that stress relieving activity inside of your day, your week, however you work better with dealing with the stress.
Awesome. I just want to ask you one other question.
Yeah.
So we talk about that productivity curve with the stress.
Yep.
When you're at your maximum productivity, is that necessarily comfortable for you, or is that a little bit uncomfortable?
And that's how that's kind of different for every person. I'm very fortunate. The job I have right now is probably the least stressful that I've ever had. My quality of life is, I would say, off the chart. If I had a chart for quality of life, just because I get to spend time with my family. I love teaching kids here. I love Texas A&M, and my boss and our family here in our department is great. But I've also been in a higher stressful job. I've been a football coach, and I've coached almost everything. I've been athletic director, and you're in the middle of a game and stress levels are off the chart. And I mean, for me, I get that nice tingly feel with that much stress too. Mm-hmm. But also my blood pressure goes up here, and then that goes back to our physical wellness. Mm-hmm. All right, and I can go into how your occupational wellness. So occupation can be a stressor, and when we talk about wellness, we have what we call our wellness wheel. And if your wheel isn't in balance, if one of those 7 components aren't in balance, then you're going to feel off. All right, so that's one of the keys, is being able to keep life balanced and keep that wheel in continuous balance motion so that nothing is out of sync. And then, luckily for me, I have a great boss. I love my job, and it's probably the best job I've ever had. So that helps definitely with my stress levels. But you know, I also officiate high school sports. I officiate football, and you know, I love that your stress level goes up. You know, you're in a competition, and that gets me going.
Yeah, I know what you're talking
about. It kind of just depends, and again, it depends on the person.
Mm-hmm.
Each person's level of stress, as far as how well they work, you know, depends. Some people work well at deadlines. All right, they have to have that deadline, and they're pushing that envelope of when it's due. Other people don't even want to get close to the deadline. They want to get everything done before it comes up. Those are two different types of people.
Right. Okay, so when under a great deal of stress, people become less able to logically process a situation. How can someone bring their mental state back to normal?
You know, that is a really tough one.
Yeah.
And to tell you the truth, I think one of the best ways that you can work at getting better at that is going through those stressful situations.
Mm.
All right. And this goes back to some training that I had when I was in ROTC, that they would put you in specific stressful situations and then add different layers of stress on top of that.
Mm.
And you go through those different scenarios over and over again until it's second nature. All right. So for instance, you're in the middle of whatever you're doing, and you may be a surgeon, and you're sitting there having to work on a vein, and all of a sudden there's a loud noise. But you don't want that surgeon to jump with that loud noise.
Right.
All right. You want them to be focused and steady, and that's what different training does to you. All right. And that's some of the training that we went through, is they put us in a stressful situation, and then they added different layers of stress, and we just kept training. You trained, and you're able to train your body and your mind to, you are paying attention to what you have to, what your task is, and nothing else is going to keep you from staying on that task. Another, it goes back to just training yourself. Another one would be an example of, say you're a coach and you have all your team up and you're talking to your team, and all of a sudden a crash happens. Well, what usually happens when a crash happens with somebody?
They get hurt.
Everybody
Yeah.
looks to see what happened. Well, if you have your kids trained to pay attention of who is talking at all that time, they're focused on you. You don't have any heads turn.
Mm-hmm.
You have them trained to be paying attention and focused on what they're supposed to be doing.
Mm-hmm. Right. That's awesome. Yeah, we might role play some stressful situations at one of our meetings.
Yeah.
Might sound like a good idea.
And it depends on the different, the different jobs.
Yeah.
All right. If you're a firefighter or a police officer, those are two different types of jobs. If you're in the military, definitely different stressful. I mean, you look at when they're going through, when they're planning an operation, they go and they train. They try to get as close to that operation training as they can that they'd see in real life. That way, nothing comes up that's going to phase them. They know exactly what they need to do to make that next adjustment.
Yeah.
And that's the same thing if you can do that in your own world. Whatever job you might have.
Yeah, perfect. So, public speaking and presentations are some of the most stressful events in many people's careers. If practice is the key to becoming a good speaker, how can students get presentation practice before their first interviews and jobs?
All right, that is another good one. And again, practice makes perfect. I used to be scared to death. But as you grow older and you keep giving more and more talks, standing in front of people, the easier it gets. It used to be if somebody was sitting there with a camera in front of you, you'd sit there and you start sweating and things like that. But the more you practice it, so a couple things you do, practice in the mirror. All right, by yourself. If you don't want to have anybody else with you, first practice in the mirror. Then practice on a roommate.
Yeah.
Practice on a parent. All right, you can practice over the phone. The more you talk about it, and if you know what your topic is, you know what your speech is going to be, practice that speech over and over again, so you know what's coming up. So if you're going through your speech and all of a sudden a gust of wind comes up and blows your papers all over, you should be able to still continue that speech even if you don't have your papers.
Right.
All right, that would make your stress level jump up probably.
Yes.
But the more practiced you are with it, the better you're off you're going to be. You might stumble a little bit, but you will be able to still make it through and get your key points in.
Sounds good. How can I control my body when I speak? That includes things like fidgeting with my hands, and talking too fast.
Well, again, that all comes with practice, and you have to be comfortable with, number one, your gestures. Number one, you don't want to always be pointing. You always want to use an open hand if you do point. And just as far as speed of how you speak takes practice. I remember when I first started, I would go a mile a minute, and my first couple lectures, I'd be talking, and the next thing I know, I look back and class is just writing, and then they're 3 pages behind on where I was. So I had to learn how to slow down. As far as words, you have to, number one, be cognizant of which ones you say a lot. Ums are big ones, ands, those are always ones that come up a lot. And I have some 220, not 220, but some health students that will come and give some lectures in my class. And one of the things that I do is I will keep a tally of every mark of their favorite word that they'll say. And so that way, at the end, that's one of the things we'll talk about. I'll point it out. Most of the time, they're already aware of it. Sometimes they have no idea that that's their favorite word. And I know that several times during the semester, I'll try to be more cognizant of myself on the words that I use. Because I know I use my wife's favorite word is or okay, or not just even okay, just K. That's one of the most used ones from students that I've seen is K.
Really? Whoa.
Not even saying okay, just K. And it's just used after every sentence. K. Talk a sentence. K. But it just takes practice. But as far as the words go, it's understanding yourself, knowing that you do say them, and trying to work through it. I mean, I try to do that every day whenever I'm in a lecture. Even if I've practiced it and practiced it, I'm still going to have 1 or 2 of those in there because it'll just slip out.
Yeah.
But it comes down to practice is your biggest thing.
Right. So
there's one right there.
There it is. How do I project my voice?
Again, practice, but it's a lot has to do with knowing where you are, knowing your audience. For instance, there's mine. A lot of it has to do with you're taking a pause and you don't want to just be silent. Going back to our previous question, if I'm out in the gym and I have my students here, I know where they're at. If there's nobody else in the gym, I still have to talk a little bit louder because it's a big space. Well, if you're a smaller space, you don't have to worry about it. But if I have another class going on, playing pickleball or something, making noise or dribbling basketballs, then I'd have to bring my group in closer so I don't have to yell. I've been told before that, please stop yelling at me. Well, I'm not really yelling at you. I just have my voice elevated so you can try to hear me over everything else that's going on. And then I've yelled at people before when game time and stuff like that. But for the most part, it just takes practice. If you do have a softer voice, try to have a microphone. Also, that goes to knowing your setting. If you do use a microphone, make sure that you test it before you go through and start your speech. And also know how the microphone projects. Some microphones you have to get real close. Others you have a little bit of a distance between when you're speaking. It all depends on the type of microphone that they're using. So it's really good to make sure that you practice, at least get a couple of tests in there to see how well it projects and how far away you need to be from it. But practice is the key, and the more you practice and the more you know what you're going to talk about, the better you can project as you go.
Here's another one. How do I make a presentation entertaining? Whenever I tell a joke, it always comes off as awkward.
Well, again, you don't always have to tell a joke. The biggest thing I like to do is I might just start with a story. It could be a funny story, or it could just be a life story, something that will capture their attention. There's my pause because I was gonna at the end of a sentence and So you see how easy it is when it goes in when you're even just in everyday speech. Okay? But the one thing is just make sure that if you do tell a joke, know what your audience is. Know what it might have to be age appropriate, especially if you have younger kids or if you have an older crowd. The one of the things that I like right now is the Saturday Night Live skit from the Silver Alexa. So Alexa is the Amazon assistant, I guess.
Yes.
We'll leave it at that. Or you say, Alexa, well, turn the radio on to 1550. Well, this one responds to any name that starts with an A. Angela, what's the temperature outside? And she'll respond. Or it has an ongoing story. It'll just say, uh-huh, as the person's talking, uh-huh, just to keep them talking and going. But it's a pretty neat one. But you could start out with something like that if you have video capability and what have you got, just to lighten the crowd mood. But you have to know what your audience is.
Right.
Again, I like to use stories because stories can get them captivated a little bit, and depending on what your topic is, if your topic's drunk driving, then a personal story about some sort of accident usually grips most people. Most people have had somebody in their life that has been injured in an accident. If you're talking about diseases, cancer is one. Almost everybody's been touched by cancer.
Yes.
There's good cancer stories. There's bad cancer stories.
Yes.
But most everybody will be captured some way by a good story. And it doesn't have to be long. Most of the best ones are nice, short, quick ones. But again, if you do have a good joke and you're pretty good at telling it, then go ahead and tell it. You just have to be comfortable and confident. We'll put it that way.
There we go. So that leads us perfectly into the next one. How do you appear confident even if you're not?
Practice. Know what your topic is. Know who your audience is if you have that ability beforehand. But practice. Know what you're doing. So even if you're up in the middle of your speech and crowd might not be doing what you want them to do or whatever, the papers blow away or you get your card shuffled out. You've practiced. You know what you're talking about. You may miss a couple of your points, but you're still going to be able to finish, and you've practiced enough that you know what's going to happen, what you're going to be talking about. So again, the more you can practice, the better. Whether you practice in front of yourself in the mirror, you can practice over the phone to your parents, you can practice in person to your parents, roommates, get a little crowd together, get little kids together.
Yeah.
Because they're the ones that, what are they gonna do? They're the ones that are gonna be moving around doing stuff, trying to distract you.
Yeah.
If you can stay on task, the little kids, and you keep them, or if, the best thing, if you can keep them on you the whole time, then you know you're doing okay.
Mm.
That's the big litmus test of the kids.
There we go. That's very interesting. Yeah.
I forgot about that one earlier.
It's all good. So I took your class freshman year, and I really enjoyed it. Would you like to talk a little bit about that?
Sure. That was Kinesiology 223 strength training, right?
Yes, sir.
So we use in 223, that is our 3-hour science class. It fits into the core curriculum. And for anybody that's not heavily already into science in their degree plan, that should fit in their core, for their core science, you have to take 9 hours of core science. So we have our 223 class, which is the science of health and fitness. And we happen to have, we did strength training. I also teach a soccer. I've taught an ultimate, and this next semester I'll teach a tennis 223 class. And we use the activity or sport. We have lots of different activities. We could have yoga, we could have Zumba, we have strength training, we have swimming, pretty much you name it, we have it for a 223, but we use the activity for the science part that we use to look through our video analysis. We have a couple video analysis projects on there, but a lot of the class is about you, the student. It's about understanding what your heart rate is, understanding what your blood pressure is, understanding nutrition, understanding cardiovascular health, muscular strength health. We talk about drugs, we talk about alcohol, we talk about sexuality, and how it pertains to you. And everything comes back to the student, and to see what they are now, and we give them the information, the best information we can, so that you, the student, can make the decision for yourself, the best decision, so that you can apply it now and for the future, whether your future's for you and your spouse, or you and your family. Once you have a family, you can take it home to grandma and grandpa, take it home to mom and dad. We have hypokinetic conditions of diabetes and obesity, the diseases of inactivity, and those are rising and rising in the United States. And the only way that we're going to get better at curbing those is, number one, understanding them, but number two, we got to be active with our diet and active with our exercise, and we have to complement each other. And one of the things you'll learn in nutrition is, we want to balance our intake and outtake. We want to break even on our caloric bank account. And if you want to lose weight, you got to up your expenditures, and you got to cut your intake a little bit. That's the best way if you want to lose weight. A little bit of both. You don't just want to cut one and don't do anything here, or just raise one and don't do anything here. You want to try to have an even balance. That's the best way of attacking weight. So we have our 223 and our 120 class. So our 120 is a 1-hour science class, and it's basically the 223, but we cut a lot of the labs out that you do in 223. So the 120 is a 1-hour science, the 223 is a 3-hour science. And then we have our Kinesiology 199 classes, and those are activity only classes. Most of those classes, 70% of the class is graded for your activity, and then we have 30% come from some sort of written assignment. Could be a test, could be a journal, depending on the instructor. But these are all activity that help. Hopefully you have fun in those classes. You can take it for a grade, or you can take it pass fail. Most kids will wait till Q drop date to understand whether they want to change it to a grade or keep it pass fail. And but it's a great way that you can get out there and work on burning some calories, and then also learning something new, hopefully, and then hopefully relieving stress. Because again, stress is, you got to figure out how you deal with stress, and don't let stress sit. You got to deal with whatever's stressing you. And that's one of the most important things you do. And again, you know, kinesiology 199s are not no longer a required course. They used to be a required course, and so those have been tapering off the number of students that have been having to take them. And then there's been an increase in stress-related instances showing up at the Student Services Center. Mm-hmm. And so who knows if there's a correlation between not having the kinesiology 199s as far as stress goes and the increase in visits to the student counseling services. But you got to work on dealing with whatever stress it is, and who knows if that's one, but those are our 3 classes that we offer, open to pretty much anybody.
Yeah, I found that the classes were really, really helpful. Especially my first semester, I was very, very stressed out, and being able to do active things, especially like when we did that, like running the race, that was really fun for me. A distraction from the studying, but you know, still class, all that kind of stuff, that was really good. But more importantly, as you were talking about the rise in diabetes and obesity in America, I would recommend our members to look this up later, but something close to 2/3 of Americans are either diabetic or pre-diabetic. And the healthcare costs that are associated with that, the projections as more people move from pre-diabetic into diabetic, they're just insane. So it can save your life, and it can save you a lot of money in the future. So getting that awareness and understanding how to start yourself off early when it's easier to maintain your weight as a young person with a kines class is something that I actually do recommend. So,
all right.
yeah, thank you so much for letting us come by.
You're welcome anytime.
Thank you so much.